I'm Dianne Garland. I'm a freelance midwife. If you want to find out what that means, just chat to me later. I'm also on the advisory group for Neil Stewart Associates. And amongst all my other things, one of my passions is about preparation for interviewing and presentations. I do a lot of interviewing with the trust that I work for. And I also work at the university and do some interviewing for them. And I think what struck me particularly at the end of last year, which is why that was asked of to do a short presentation about it, was however hard we try, we were sometimes struggling to get really good information out of candidates, and that usually was because they actually hadn't prepared for the interview. So this is just hopefully some ideas that might help, particularly for interviewing, but also for any presentations. Oh, we're not going forward. My button's not working. See, good preparation. Yeah. Lovely. So, great part to point. First impressions. I think one of the things that always strikes me is, how sometimes information that we're gleaning from applications and from you at your first impression is not always as clear and precise as it actually needs to be. So that really goes back to this issue about preparation. Please, please, please have an up-to-date CV. It's amazing, again, how many people don't have up-to-date CVs. And I'm talking about, band 5s looking for 6s or 6 looking for 7s. They're not difficult to keep up to date, and there's plenty on the internet to actually help us with that. Also, portfolio. Sue already mentioned this morning about getting ready for revalidation. Part of that is keeping your portfolio up to date all of the time. After today's session, don't go home and just absorb it, share it, great, but actually make sure you get it into your portfolio. Please, as well, with CVs, what's your email addresses? You may have to think about getting a Hotmail one, because some of the email addresses, when we look at applications, I kid you not, sexy legs too. Yeah, really doesn't portray either the image you want to give to that potential interviewer, and or if you're looking for a promotion. So really carefully look at your email addresses. It's quite sad when you see some that are actually put as our first point of contact sometimes with you is these, sexy Sue, sexy legs, get a Hotmail address and just make it really bland and simple. If you have to provide a supporting statement, however it's provided, make sure you talk about your unique selling points, the USP, not a USB, okay, we're not into technology, but certainly what are your unique selling points? What makes you, you? They're the sort of questions you will always get asked about at interview, whether it's at student level or as you going for band 5 or 6 and further up. They always want to know about you. This sounds really basic, but believe you me, this is the sort of things that we don't capture when we're trying to interview. We always ask about previous experiences, and if it's voluntary work, we'll talk a little bit more about that. If it's work experience, which I know is difficult for students to be, they have real problems finding work experience. The days of being able to come in and spend a day or so in a maternity unit or shadowing someone in most places is long gone. So you have to be creative if you're guiding potential students to be about where they can get that sort of experience and exposure. That's the in-word, the buzzword people are looking for at the moment. What have you learnt? What are transferable skills? Again, really simple. Ask someone to read through your application and supporting statements. Please do not rely on computers to pick up every spelling mistake. That is not the first impression I'm sure any of us would want to actually show. But believe you me, we get spelling mistakes, and we know people who have done, a search on their computers, and it doesn't pick everything up. So get someone to read it through. Make sure it makes sense and that any spelling mistakes have been, picked up. So if we're doing voluntary work, what are we going to gain from that, and what can you share with that exposure? Well, you might want to share what sort of experiences you've had, that you might want to be gaining skills. It might be that you want to learn something new, something that you've never encountered before. Really simple things, timekeeping. It doesn't matter where you go for that exposure. We expect people to turn up on time. I told you I'm a bit OCD about timekeeping. This is part and parcel of it. These are the skills, even with just voluntary work, you can share and get into your applications. if you can take it one step further, many of the potential students I interviewed recently were working in places like Costa. I'm not going to go over the coffee queues today, but that's a great image. You know, how on earth are we going to actually say to someone, we need you to be upright, you know, acute, be very aware of what's going on. You know, were they aware of those cues? I mean, I gave up after 15 minutes, so I'm sure some of you did as well. But what can we do with paid work? Well, it's about taking responsibility, whether it is just marking, you know, the cup with the letter C because you're going to just have coffee, or DC because it's decaffeinated coffee. It's still a skill. And I think for potential students, it's really hard sometimes to actually transfer what you're learning in that sort of paid environment into what you can share with us at interview. Teamwork. We all work in teams, just different types of teams. So tease out what it is about that team. You know, this morning Maggie was talking a lot about what creates a good environment, a good working environment. Tease that out. If you're working in Costa, mustn't be too... Go for Starbucks this time. Talk about Starbucks. You know, what makes it good to be in that environment? Where's that teamwork coming together? Often asked at interview, tell me about a stressful or critical situation you've had to deal with. Well, today would be a great example because of the queues. I know there were people getting very frustrated out there. Short break, can't get their coffee. That's stressful. So what is you as that person doing to help people? What are your managers doing to help move that queues on? It's not difficult. If you're in a work situation that's a caring situation, what are those transferable skills you can bring to your new role, and particularly as student midwife? Simple things about interview preparation. What skills? This is amazing. I was really, really disheartened when I was interviewing, and I was asking some of the students about why have they chosen to come to that university compared to another one. And it appeared, I know people are frightened at interviews, okay, we have to get over that stress and take the deep breath, but why that particular university, or trust if you're transferring once you've qualified, why that one and not somewhere else? And people have not investigated about that trust. Yeah? I have to say, one of the saddest things I heard from a student when I asked her about why coming to this university, first of all, she didn't hear the question because she actually said, well, you need midwives, don't you? And that was her response. And the question I actually asked her was, why do you want to be a midwife? And what she came back with was, well, you need midwives, don't you? Yeah, we do, but we want quality. Read online. What's hot gossip? Well, there's loads of hot gossip, sadly, out there in the press all the time. It may be about maternity and midwifery. The ethics, the one I highlighted and printed off, of course, that has already been mentioned. We were talking about it at dinner last night, about the Irish referendum on abortion. You don't have to get political, but you do have to know about the politics of what's going on in the environments we work in with a small p. So keep your eyes and ears open. Female genital mutilation, female genital health, anything. Issues that are empowering. The royal wedding. Look at the newspapers the weeks leading up to any interview so you know what's hot gossip at national, international and local level. You know, there are so many free papers and yet we don't always look. And why do I put the royal wedding? Because there was so much about Meghan Markle and how empowering she was for women as a role model. Watch TV programmes. That's a classic one that gets asked. How did you prepare for your interview today? And sometimes, again, with students, oh, well, I watched Call the Midwife. Okay, take a deep breath. What else did you do? Well, you know, I watched One Born Every Minute. Okay, so let's take that one step further. What questions do you have about those programmes? Things I've put up there. How care may have altered the statistics that have changed so dramatically. In my career, things have changed quite dramatically. Home birth rates now, the colleagues at the front have gone, but we were talking about home birth rates just from different areas. You don't have to stray far across to the next county to find why one trust is managing to get a 6% home birth rate and another one less than 1%. What are they doing? Why? Because I watched Call the Midwife, and yes, they are having a lot of home births. Yeah, it was the 1960s. Things have changed. Why have they changed? Well, there weren't a lot of women on there who seemed to have complex needs. No, you're right. What's the other bad pun coming up? The other biggest issue for us at the moment is obesity. High BMI women who are having babies now, and the complexity that adds to all of our care. So yeah, watch Call the Midwife. Yeah, watch One Born Every Minute, but tease out of it, particularly if you know there's an interview brewing, that you know what to answer to those sort of questions. There's huge amounts going on about choices. We've heard a lot already this morning, and I'm sure there'll be more during the day. Consent, very highlighted, sadly, by Millie. And the ethics behind it goes back to maybe some of the Irish stuff. Online organisations, many of these organisations you can get into even if you don't physically belong to them. They will have home pages. You may not be able to go into a lot of depth at those pages, but you will be able to find out about the organisations. Know what the initials mean. And if you can't remember them, write them down. At the end you'll see I say about making sure you've got your little crib sheet in front of you so that you know what these initials mean and not just put them out as though they're just something I should know about. Lots of government websites. Yeah, this is all about preparation. I asked my neighbour, who's got 2 young girls coming up to career time, what sort of preparation the schools were giving them, what career advice. Almost nothing, almost nothing. And yet they're expected to come out into the workforce and be prepared to go for an interview, which we all know is daunting. Any interview is daunting. So what government websites are there as well? Care Quality Commission will always, as will Ofsted, have a report about that organisation you're going into. Do we do that as midwives before we decide about whether or not we want to go and work in another trust? Do we actually look up what the CQC says works well in that trust and what doesn't work well? And then compare that to where you are now and where it sits and what challenges there might be. Embrace, maternal mortality. It's been mentioned again this morning. We should know where we sit within the Embrace reports, where we're going to go and work and where we are working at the moment. Morecambe Bay, I'm not going to go a lot into it, but we all know Morecambe Bay's happened. And of course, only the last fortnight, Gosport has raised its head. Is it anything to do with maternity? Consent, ethics, analgesia? Yeah, there's a lot going on. We need to be on the ball and we need to be political with a small p. And then the new sciences, which again, at student level, I wouldn't expect them to know a lot, but maybe they've got a specialist interest in it. But certainly as midwives, if these are new sciences to you, to your organisation, as an interviewee, I would expect to have looked into them. And as an interviewer, I would expect you to know. So do we know why optimal cord clamping is good and why we've changed it from calling it delayed cord clamping? So just the words we use are important. What about the microbiome? What do we know about the microbiome? Look at the charity and consumer groups as well. Mumsnet, Mush. See what mums are saying about the care. Again, Millie's talked a lot about it already this morning. Yeah, we never know what each other are going to talk about, so it's nice when they fit together. Hundreds of reports. And again, if you haven't got access at local level, go to your local library. They'll all have them. And yet again, it's all about this preparation. I don't expect anyone to read all of these documents. But if you're going to mention one of them, make sure you've read it. Even if it is only the executive summary, which you could always get off the internet, so you know what you're talking about. Don't just say the words, because somebody will ask you about Morecambe Bay, because you've mentioned it. Oh, I see you put it in your supporting statement. Tell me more. And it's that blunt look, and you think all you've done is looked up a word and actually haven't had the time to explore it. First impressions. So I apologise that my clicker wouldn't work. It is important. There is so much out there about that first impression. How do you actually welcome that person into the interviewee? and the other way round. How does the interviewer? So do's and don'ts. Nobody expects anyone to go out and buy a suit, but we do expect people to turn up looking smart. I'm saying this with feeling because this is not what's happening. You would not believe the way some people turn up at interview. You are going or are already in a profession. We should look professional. You'll see a couple of outfits for me in a minute and how I alter it. That first smile, I don't know, I noticed a few people did have them on, badges that say, hello, my name is. It's that welcome, and the guy there is showing it beautifully, yeah? Have that welcome, have that smile, be confident, yeah? Body language, really important. These are things you can practice. Not with your best friend. You need someone who doesn't know you so well, who actually wants to find out about you. So how are you going to get that across to them? I wear different outfits for different roles. I have about 15 different roles, part-time in all of them. So the one where you can see me wearing a suit is because that was when I'm a trustee for APEC, Action on Preeclampsia. So I'm going in with that hat on, and this was the Houses of Parliament, and this was the baby bereavement launch last year. So I'm going in a very different capacity to the other outfit, which is one of my typical Indian outfits when I'm teaching, because I'm usually going to crawl around the floor when I'm talking about birth positions, and if it's water births, getting in and out of pools, you know, leg on the side of the pool. You've got to wear the right outfits for the right things. And they are extremes, but that's exactly what I'm saying. It gives a different impression with what we actually wear. So on the day, really simple things again, but sadly we let ourselves down. So on the day, plan your journey. Quite a few people I know have said today, the journeys have been horrendous. You know, it's a hot day and they say the rails are not working well, they're getting too hot. Well, that's nothing new. We've known for 20 years. Every time there's a hot day, they say the rails don't work. Well, what's the surprise? Why haven't we planned that? Why haven't we thought through, about how we're going to get there on the day? Arrive in plenty of time. There's nothing worse than actually bursting to need to go to the toilet and they're saying, right, Mrs. Garland, your interview, and you think, I need to go to the loo. Get there in plenty of time. Feel calm, feel collected. Reread any questions you've got. Reread if it's a presentation, which we're going to do in a minute. Know what equipment's required. If you've been asked to do a presentation, make sure you've got a backup. Find out what equipment they already have. If it's a USB, make sure your USB will work in their system because they don't always talk to each other. If you're running late, really simple, let them know. I know students often have to apply to lots of different universities, but the number of students who do not turn up and haven't even had what I believe is a common courtesy to phone us to tell them that you've actually accepted a different university. I just find that amazing that somebody would do that. I'm an old girl, okay? Always have questions. Where do you see this university or this hospital going in the next 5 years? Where is their forward planning? What's the biggest challenge as a new student to this environment or as a newly qualified midwife in this environment? And what support am I going to get? They may have highlighted it, but make sure you've got those questions ready, written in front of you. What challenges do you see the university or trust having in the future? And a really good question, which is why I've highlighted it in the blue. Somebody actually asked me, why did you become a midwife? First time I've ever had an interviewee turn it back on me to ask me why I became a midwife. So better to have them written down, and even if they've already been answered, have them there. It shows that you've thought and you've forward planned. Short bit on the presentations. There are some real high-profile presentations that if you're going for an interview, 5, 6s and beyond, you will often be asked to do. They're all online, they're not difficult to find. Resilience, human factors, the catchwords of the day, continuity of care will often come up, diversity, demographics, equality of services, ensuring safe care, clinical governance, the famous 6 Cs, and know what they are. Recommendations from local reports goes back to the CQC and what are national issues. The same things will come up. They might rephrase them, but they are very similar when you actually end up going for presentations, particularly for interview. Words of affirmation can say an awful lot in a presentation. There are so many on the internet. You haven't got to make your own up. Yes, some people will do wardles and love making them, but there are many. And I love that one. So many rivers, but they all reach the sea. Really simple. Words say 1,000 things. These are some of my affirmations. By helping others get exactly where they want, I'm able to receive exactly what I want. I'm a strong and competent businesswoman. I went into business in 2005, and that's exactly how I feel. And I'm proud of saying that about myself. Don't undervalue what we do. We are very, very strong women, and we should be proud of that and not be afraid to say that to other people. Hopefully that fits in a bit with what Maggie was saying this morning. Real life events, if you're doing presentations, stories are great. Picture says 1,000 words. Please just, of course, remember confidentiality and that you've got permission to use those photos. Obviously, I have. These are all my photos from various experiences. Oh, the one at the bottom, I've forgotten that. That's the one I said about making sure you wear the right things. This is me teaching about shoulder dystocia in a pool. Yeah, make sure you have the permission, but make sure they're appropriate photos. Pictures say 1,000 words. Presentation are like the news at 10. You do the introduction, you set the scene with the question that you've been given. You do your presentation, short, sharp and to the point. Don't overload the slides. The classic way of being taught is 1 minute for one slide. So if you know you've got 25 minutes, you should have no more than 20 slides, because you should always allow time for questions. Just like the news of 10, the conclusion. Just tell them what you've just said. And if it is particularly for promotion for jobs, make sure that you have handouts or how they can get access to the information you've just given them. It looks really good if you're being interviewed for a promotion, if someone's actually come in with the presentation and you actually give it to those people who are interviewing. Please don't overdo the slides. Death by PowerPoint, all right? If you've never encountered or had exposure to TED Talks, everybody heard of TED Talks? They're fab, aren't they? Anything and everything you want is on a TED Talk. Use TED Talks. They are so good at actually helping us realise where we're coming from. So, my USPs, my unique selling points, timekeeper. I also use lots of props. I love props. So one of my props, and I use this when I'm teaching women about how not to push in second stage and do non-directive pushing. You can't push if you're blowing a windmill. So that's one of my props. My other one, if you were anyone who's ever heard me talk about my postnatal care, and I talk about it being the Cinderella service. So here's my magic wand. Props actually do an awful lot. Yeah, you've got to find what's your unique selling point. I'm a prop person. I like props. Something to remember me by. That's what you've got to do in a competitive market that we actually are in. Any final questions? I'll leave that to you. And that's me with 2 minutes to spare. Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions before lunch they want to ask? Please do. Is a mic coming? Oh, you want to ask me? Please do, yes. Yeah, if it's about the business side, that's fine. No one? Oh, thank you. Hang on. I'll make a rush to you.
Hiya. I'm already a student midwife, and one of our local trusts had 5 vacancies for Band 5s, and they had 72 applications.
Wow, yeah.
So we're just wondering if you've got any advice on how we can make our applications stand out, and if we are able to get an interview, what kind of things we can do to really sell ourselves at interview.
So was that a trust? The question, I hope you all heard it, it's muffly to me on that mic, but 72 applicants for 5 places, yeah, at Band 5s. Was it a trust that knew you? Had you trained there? Or was it another trust?
No, I'm still a first year, but it's one of the ones that some of our cohort train at.
Right, yeah. I think it's really hard because if you train there, sometimes people assume they know you. So actually, I think it's harder sometimes to sell yourself if it's your own trust because they don't know you, believe you me, they don't know you. I think some of what we said here, and you know, midwifery training is midwifery training. It will have some uniqueness, but you need to find something that is very unique. So maybe a birth story within that, that I had a really interesting home birth. Only going to put 2 lines in because they might think, oh, that's good. We have less than 2% home birth rate. Why has that stood out for you? And then get ready with your story to capture them. I think certainly USBs, if you had any exposure to outside, students now have the wonderful opportunity to have time to go elsewhere. And I know there's finances and there is some money out there, but just going to a neighbouring trust and see why they do one thing one way and we don't do it, and get that into your application. During my elective, I went. If you can go further abroad, great. And you don't actually have to go that far in the UK to have actually gone to like a whole world. How they work in Wales is different to Scotland. That's why we travel all around the country to get that exposure at the festivals. Go further afield, just go over to Southern Ireland. It's like a different world. Midwifery is so different. So you actually haven't got to go far to get that exposure. If you can go even further, fabulous. So I think it is that unique selling point. You have to have something that captures someone's interest when they pick up your application. So USPs, I would say, definitely. Thank you. Oh, final one, then we're definitely on time for lunch.
No, just to comment on, when you're picking out applications, I found a lot of student midwives and midwives that are Band 5, when they go either for a job within the trust that they already work, or go for a promotion, when you ask questions like, why do you want to work for this trust? Yeah. And you get the answer, well, I live here, and that's the beginning of the interview, and it just turns it off completely for me, because to me it shows that you've made no preparation, you've made an assumption that we know you, when in natural fact we might not have worked with you. No. So preparation, really important, because I hear things like, well, I didn't do any preparation because I didn't think I need to, because I already work for the trust. Yeah. Well, nowadays it just doesn't sell at all, and when you come across like that on your form or interview, for me, interviewing, it just turns me off completely. Exactly.
Yeah. And the final thing for me, I had, again, how have you prepared for this interview for a potential student midwife? She said, well, I haven't really done anything for a couple of days because I was tired. And I think if you're tired now, you wait to become a student midwife. It's not thinking, and that's why that preparation, I agree with you, is so important. And it just sounds so basic, but if we're not even having that support with our schools, helping the students to be in whatever they're going to, we've got to start somewhere. I would love to be able to go back into schools. Maybe now I'm retiring, maybe that's something I'll do for the future. Who knows? Thank you very much. Go and have some lunch, and do look at those displays and posters, because people spend a long time doing them for us. So thank you very much.